was that I wanted to rebuild the backbone of the country. And the backbone of the country is the working class and middle class. I'm so sick and tired of trickle down. When the middle class does well, the poor have a way up, and the wealthy do just fine. They do just fine. And the third thing, which a lot of you didn't like, I know, I thought we had to unify the country. Because ultimately, we are a democracy. And there needs to be, for it to work, there has to be consensus. And the consensus, you got to get a majority. We've not been able to do that for a lot of the important things. That's why we have to continue to maintain our majority. This off-year election, in my view, may be the most important off-year election in modern history. Because we know what happens. We know the fundamental change that shifts if we lose the House and Senate. The only thing I'll have then is a veto pen. And so, folks, I want to thank Nancy for your introduction, for your friendship all these years, Nance, and Paul, thank you as well. And I want to thank the extraordinary job you've done delivering the omnibus, just like you delivered so many critical pieces of legislation last year. And Hakeem and Steny and Jim and Emmanuel Cleaver and Pete, Congresswoman Catherine Clark, and all of you out there. Let me first say that I want to thank you. Thank you for the support you provided Ukraine. I was on the phone today for a better part of an hour with Zelensky, who I speak to almost daily. The people of Ukraine have demonstrated a remarkable source of bravery and courage, but the security assistance that you've provided has been absolutely critical in their defense. Second, I want to thank you for showing a unified front to the world. When Putin unleashed his assault, he thought he could divide NATO. He thought he could literally divide this country, the West, the United States, in terms of the parties. I know a former ambassador knows that out there. He thought he could divide Democrats and Republicans at home. But he failed. He failed. For months, the United States has worked tirelessly to keep our allies and partners together. As our former ambassador you see on television a lot, thank God, will tell you I've spent literally hours and hours and hours and hours keeping the alliance together, the EU, NATO, and all of our allies, including our Asian allies. As a result, we've been able to ramp up our economic pressure on Putin and further isolate Russia on the global stage. This morning, along with the G7 nations in Germany, Canada, France, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom, we moved, which I know you wanted to do initially, and Nancy, I drove her crazy, on most favored nation status, as we call it in the United States, permanent normal trade relations, and eliminate them. But folks, I know I've occasionally frustrated you, but more important than us moving when we want to is making sure all of NATO is together. They have different vulnerabilities than we do, just like in the oil embargo. A lot of them could not. The only way it took, I think you know, weeks to work out. I said, we're going to block oil, Russian oil and energy. We consume 15% of it. They rely totally on it. Without Russian oil, they're going to find themselves in a position where they get choked off in a way that far exceeds anything we do. So it took a long time sitting with my counterparts and saying, look, we're going to block oil, but I'm not going to ask you to do it. I'm going to say to you, you do what you can. I'm going to explain why it's not rational for you to do the same thing. In the meantime, we're going to help you get energy through liquefied natural gas and a whole range of other things. The point is, revoking PNTR for Russia has made it harder for Russia to do business with the United States, but in doing it with unison with our allies that kept together make up half the global economy, half of it, is a crushing blow to Russia. Along with our partners and allies, we've stepped up pressure on corrupt Russian billionaires. We're increasing coordination among the G7 countries and to target, capture the ill-begotten gains, the yachts. You see some of these yachts 450 feet long. No, I'm serious. Hundreds of millions of dollars in value. They're luxury apartments. The totality of our economic sanctions and export controls are crushing the Russian economy. The ruble has lost, I know many of you know this in detail, lost more than half its value. You know what the value of a ruble is versus a dollar? You need 200 rubles to equal $1 today. 200. Moscow Stock Exchange is closed for a simple reason. I get asked, well, why is it closed? Because for the last 2 weeks, because the moment it opens, it will be disbanded. You hear me? It will blow up. Credit rating agencies have downgraded Russia's government to junk status. Junk status. The list of private business and international corporations leaving Russia is growing day by day by day. I want to be clear, though. We're going to make sure Ukraine has the weapons to defend themselves from invading Russian force. And we will send money and food aid to save Ukrainian lives. We're going to welcome Ukrainian refugees with open arms if, in fact, they come all the way here. And as we provide this support to Ukraine, we're going to continue to stand together with our allies in Europe and send an unmistakable message that we will defend every inch of NATO territory, every single inch, with a united, galvanized NATO. One movement. That's why I moved over 12,000 American forces along the borders with Russia, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Romania, etc. Because they move once. Granted, if we respond, it is World War III, but we have a sacred obligation on NATO territory, a sacred obligation, Article 5. And we will not, although we will not fight the Third World War in Ukraine. Putin's war against Ukraine was never be a victory. Democrats are rising to meet the moment, rallying the world on the side of peace and security. We're showing the strength and we'll never falter. But look, the idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III, okay? Let's get it straight here, guys. That old expression, don't kid a kidder. Now, I'd like to speak to our broader purpose here today, to remind everybody where we were a year ago, where we've gotten since, the direction we're headed in, and all of you know that today is the anniversary, as Nancy said, since we passed the American Rescue Plan. Within the first month of an office, thank God you did it. And anybody thought, well, we're going to pass a bill that's $1.9 trillion? We're going to do that? Well, yeah, you did it. I ask you, and you did it. Few pieces of legislation, no hyperbole, in American history have done more to lift this country out of a crisis than we did. It took about 2 million Americans before I was sworn in. 2 million Americans have been vaccinated. Today, because of the efforts what you voted for, we have more than 250 million Americans fully vaccinated. You all remember the lines of cars? Remember nice-looking cars stretched for hours and hours to milk in just to get a box of food. Well, guess what? Stretching those miles and miles no longer is happening. That box of food is not only in the table, in the trunk. Because of that law, 41 million people put food on their table and are putting it on the table who wouldn't have been able to. Because of that law, we helped to keep a roof over 4 million people's heads who were about to be evicted. And we gave families what my dad used to call just a little bit of breathing room. Just a little bit of breathing room. Because we took action, we created 6.7 million jobs last year, more than any other time in American history. And we hadn't stopped. Last month, we created over 678,000 jobs in February to get us well over 7 million jobs. Unemployment is down 3.8%. The economy grew 5.7%, the best economic growth in the last 4 decades. And the leading financial firm on Wall Street, Moody's, estimates that because of the rescue plan, 4 million more jobs are created, unemployment is 2% lower than it would have been, and had we failed to ask. And it didn't cause the inflation. Look, there's more to the story than that. Many of you remember when we went through that last financial crisis in 2008, I had the dubious distinction of the president standing before all of you and said, and Sheriff Joe is going to take care of the Recovery Act. Well, guess what? The economy recovered, but underneath the recovery, just like every other recovery in our history, there was a lot of pain, a lot of pain. Republicans in Congress refused to give President Obama the additional recovery funds he asked for. And the truth is, a lot of folks never got back on their feet. A whole lot of young people saw their futures dimmed, diminished. They didn't get back on track. And what's economists called the economic scarring that occurred as a consequence of that recession. The chronic pain when an economy comes back, but some of the folks are left behind and left behind almost permanently, trapped in long-term unemployment, evictions and foreclosures. Study after study showed that when you're stuck in that cycle, it has the worst impact on your emotional health and that of your children and your family members that you can imagine. And that's serious. So when I came to office in the midst of this crisis, I was determined not to let that happen. Together, we made the choice to ask for all that we needed, to leave nobody behind, to minimize the pain and the hopelessness and despair that so many had just lost their jobs, lost everything, through no fault of their own. And look what happened. It isn't just that unemployment rate has dropped at a record pace. We've also seen the biggest drop in long-term unemployment ever recorded in American history. Nearly 2.5 million Americans have got to break out of that cycle of long-term unemployment. We've seen the most significant drop in black and Hispanic unemployment ever recorded. Black employment fell by more than 30%. Hispanic unemployment fell by 9% to 4.4%. We've seen the lowest child poverty rate ever recorded, 40% decline in child poverty. The lowest number of home foreclosures ever recorded, down less than a third of what they were before the pandemic. Record low credit card delinquencies because families had money in their pockets. The list goes on. We've got a long way to go, though. I'm not saying we're over, we're just getting going. And a lot of work to do, but never forget what we've accomplished together so far. And by the way, the American people just trying to stay above water don't understand this. You tell them what the American Recovery Act was, they look at you like, what are you talking about? Understandably. They're like my family. Mom, dad, 4 kids, grandpa living in the house in a 3-bedroom suite-level home. Just every single day figuring out how you put enough food on the table, even when things are okay. Well, and on this one anniversary, the American Rescue Plan, let's be clear. We did it alone, without one single solitary Republican vote. The American economy is flat on its back. It was the Democrats, it was you that brought us back. And you didn't stop there. You invested in America. In fact, you passed the biggest investment of rebuilding the nation in history. Now, it's true we got some Republicans, friends, to help on the Infrastructure Act. But we're talking how many in the House? 12, 13, 14 or something, whatever it was? 13. I mean, come on. I was happy for them, don't get me wrong. And then every one of them got attacked. Look, but have you noticed that every new bridge, every trench dug to put in to take out lead pipes, every trench dug, there's a Republican standing there saying, this is a great thing. Wonderful. We did it. Even Mitch McConnell, for God's sake. You know, as we say in my outfit, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. This has been so much since the last confession. Look, the simple fact is, this infrastructure bill is going to transform America. I mean, not figuratively, literally transform America. That's already starting. Instead of having infrastructure week, we have an infrastructure decade we voted for, okay? We got 4,000 projects all across the country, including 1,500 bridges in disrepair that are starting to be repaired this year. This year. People back home need to know what's happening. By the way, where's my Pittsburgh group? Where are you? They're in Pittsburgh. Anyway, I just reached out to Pittsburgh. That bridge, you saw that bridge, it was devastating. I stood there about that bridge. It had gone down an hour before I got there. Over 100-foot fall. Only a couple folks on that bridge. And if it had been 2 hours later, school buses would have been filled. Children would have died. I mean, it was, you saw the pictures in the paper. You ought to stand there and lean over and look at it. Look, we need to tell the American people, this law is going to create millions of jobs rebuilding roads and bridges and airports and ports, internet, and a whole range of other things. Because that's what it's going to do. And that's why I'm not going to get into it right now, but that's why we have to make sure we have our education system up and running so we can produce the kind of workers we need, et cetera. But it's going to start to get rid of the poisonous lead pipes as well, so our kids and families can drink clean water. There's 10 million homes with lead pipes in America. And some of you on the Health Committee know the incredible studies done on the impact of lead on the brain of children and children's development. 400,000 schools. We're going to invest $65 billion to deliver affordable high-speed internet everywhere in America, urban, suburban, tribal, city. And by the way, we can't be this United States of America, we can't be the country where for a mom to get her kid on the internet to be able to do their homework has to pull into the McDonald's parking lot. I mean, for real. That's what's happening. This law is going to put an end to all of that. It's going to put people in a much different position to be able to determine their own judgments about when to sell their cattle, when they should. We're going to change things. But look, we all know that despite the progress we made, families are still struggling. They're struggling with higher prices. As I said, I grew up in a family where the price of gas went up. Everybody felt it. You talked about it. It mattered. It mattered. But let's be absolutely clear about why prices are so high right now. They're very high for two reasons, notwithstanding what the Republicans say. COVID, number one. What happened was, the way the global economy works, if a factory in Taiwan makes computer chips, shuts down because of COVID, it causes a ripple effect that can slow down the manufacturing in Detroit, which it did. One hitch can hold up everything. Because of the pandemic, we've had disruption in our supply chain materials and import materials. At the same time, the strength and speed of our economic recovery and families making more money still kept up. So here you had the unusual situation that during the pandemic, people had money to spend. But what they didn't do is they didn't want to go to restaurants. They didn't want to go out and go on vacations. They didn't spend money on leisure activities. So they wanted to spend it on other things, on hard goods, home improvements, televisions, additions to their homes. The very products are slowed down by disruptions in the supply chain because there weren't people cutting 2x4s because of COVID. They were shut down. I could go on and list, you all know this. I'm preaching to the choir here. So what happened? Prices went up exponentially. Just take a look at automobiles last year. 1/3 of all the inflation in America last year was because of the price of automobiles. People had the money to buy automobiles, finally. But because the companies couldn't get semiconductors, they couldn't make the automobiles. As a result, the price of automobiles skyrocketed. And used cars, the reason used cars went up when the COVID hit and the leisure industry shut down, the rental cars sold all their stock. And so people were in real trouble. The second big reason for inflation is Vladimir Putin. From the moment he put his over 150,000 troops on the Ukrainian border, the price of gasoline in January went up 75 cents. And Putin began amassing troops along the border, and guess what? The world took notice. And those of you who work in the business know that the market anticipated. Prices went up more. And then Putin invaded. Make no mistake, inflation is largely the fault of Putin. I love, the Republicans saying it's Biden's gas pipeline. Biden said he's going to stop the Keystone pipeline, and I did. And that's the reason prices went up. Folks, let's get something straight here. The Keystone pipeline was 2 years away and had been 2% finished. Give me a break. Give me a break. Headline fact checker in the New York Times. Republicans wrongly blame Biden for rising gas prices. And it goes on to explain why gas prices are so high. Washington Post op-ed by Dana Milbank. Opinion, Biden heeded Republicans' plea to ban Russian oil. They pounced. And it goes on to talk about why it's gone. Don't let anybody tell you anything you did supporting the idea that we block Russian oil coming into the country, which is going, and I said at the time, prices are going to go up for gasoline. It wasn't anything we did. And by the way, you're in a situation right now where if you take a look, the idea, can we pump more oil? There are now there are 172 gas and oil rigs running. Now there are 519 in operation before this all began. But guess what? They have over 7,000 permits to dig oil if they want. Why aren't they out pumping oil? Why aren't they out pumping oil? Because they've said, and they're very clear, Wall Street bankers have made it very clear. Not a joke. Check it out. And I recommend these two articles to you, just as a little bit of a primer. You probably already know it. What's happened? Well, the oil companies and the executives, they don't want to pump more oil, although they have every capacity to do so. Nothing is slowing them up from doing it if they want to. Why? Rather than spend the profits in the increased price of gasoline, they would rather take those profits and buy back stock, buy back their own stock, rather than take that money and invest it in pumping new oil. Not a joke. Not a joke. So don't tell me gas prices rose because I've slowed down the American energy production. In my first year in office, American production grew by 9.7 million barrels a day to 11.6 million, while we still made a major, major effort to deal with global warming and changing the way in which we shift to renewable energy. And don't tell me gas prices rose because of the American Rescue Plan. The San Francisco Federal Reserve, analyzed this, and other outfits confirm the rescue plan contributed to 0.3% of inflation. 0.3 inflation. They're the facts. Democrats didn't cause this problem. Vladimir Putin did. And we are working on to fix it. Because of the work we did, this country is vaccinated and started building the economy, the bottom up and the middle out. Something incredible is happening. We're seeing a manufacturing revival I don't think even those of you from the Midwest thought would occur. The pride that comes from stamping products made in America. Intel came to see me, the CEO. He said he wants to invest $20 billion to build factories in Eastern Ohio, manufacture computer chips. Semiconductors, the power of the world in everyday life, smartphones, Intel, technology that doesn't exist today. And they're prepared to increase their investment from $20 billion now to $100 billion now, as soon as you get final passage innovation.
Those were just the latest remarks there from President Biden earlier today. You're watching live now from Fox. We are going to take a quick 2-minute break here. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about COVID-19, the latest here as